Hey, how you doing? Welcome back to another episode of The Art of Making Things Happen, the podcast with me, your host, Steve Sims. Today, I've got Annie Hyman Pratt on, and if any of you are thinking, well, who the hell's that? Hey, you don't have to know, but I bet you've heard of Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf, okay? Listen to this lady, listen to how she grew up, literally within that brand, what she did with it, and what she realized she had to focus on. And I'll give you a spoiler, people. Listen to the show and benefit. Hey, Annie, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Now, you're one of these, you're an onion. And that's, I don't know if that's the most complimentary thing that's ever you've been called, but when you start delving into you a bit by bit by bit, there's just these powerful layers that keep coming out. And I was very blessed to meet you at Joe Polish's Genius Network in Arizona a while back. And like everyone, they all stand up and they go, oh, I've got a book come out and I did this and I did that. And let's be honest, you look at a lot of these and you go, yeah, that's great for you, but you're quite successful. You've had your hands in probably, one of the biggest brands out. Now, you were actually the former CEO of the Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf empire, and you
Yeah.
multiplied and scaled that before arranging the sellout, correct?
Correct.
How
Yes.
long were you part of that?
For all of the 90s. However, since it was a family business, um, you know, kind of my whole life. So actually, that's where I really got my love of business because my parents started the Coffee Bean in, in the middle of the 60s. And and they weren't selling like a lot of beverages. They were selling pounds of coffee. My dad had been in the office coffee service business. My mom's from Sweden. They went to visit her home country, and my dad fell in love with European coffee because here in the United States, we only had terrible coffee at that time. So they decided to open a store, and it did pretty well. All during the 60s and a lot of the 70s. But then in the late 70s, retail started to really crash. And through the late 70s and all of the 80s, my parents actually had a hard time. At one point, they got to 16 stores. They had to shrink all the way down to seven. And those seven were pretty low volume until the end of the 90s when I think of it as the beverage revolution. And that's when people stopped, buying pounds of coffee to take home, or they bought very, few of those and a lot of beverages on their way to work, or to get an ice blended, which we invented those in the afternoon, on a hot day in Southern California. And so then we grew very quickly all during the 90s. My dad had run into heart problems and retired. I came back into the business after having a quick career in finance and at a big accounting firm. And I came back to the business with what I think of as a lot of wind at my back, you know, and so grew very quickly. So I took it from 7 stores to 70 stores. And during that time, each of the stores more than tripled in volume. Like when I first started with the stores, a store was lucky to do 300,000 a year. And after I was at the end of the 90s when we sold the business, a typical store, an average store would do over 900,000 a
Wow.
year. So yeah, and we had some doing several million. And it was a wonderful time. It was great. It's like I couldn't break enough things to have it, or how should I say, the business was growing so quickly. I had a lot of forgiving room. I could make a lot of mistakes, and I did. I made a lot of mistakes.
I remember actually I lived in Europe in the 90s and I came over to America in 2000 and I was actually in um the West Coast, sorry, the East Coast.
Yeah.
And we had Starbucks there. But people would constantly talk about, well, it's this isn't as good as Coffee Bean.
Right.
And it was like you were West Coast loyal to Bean and Tea Leaf. Now,
Yes.
you were at the time, just to hold on to this chapter for a second, you as you were exiting, then you had Starbucks. Was Starbucks good for your business or bad for your business? And it's a big loaded question.
Yes, it was excellent for our business. It was fantastic for our business because Starbucks basically educated the consumer about fancy European style coffee drinks, right? Like they taught people the word cappuccino and latte. and 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 they had so many advertising dollars to do that. So we couldn't do that on our own, right? We were pretty small. But since they were making making the public aware of how you should have these little luxuries every day, don't drink the burnt stuff at home. Come in and have a great latte or a ice, for us, an ice blended mocha. Um, and we really benefited from that because when people would compare, they would become loyal to Coffee Bean. And
Yeah.
and early on, Starbucks' strategy for coming to the Los Angeles area, when they first came to Los Angeles, their strategy was to put stores by our biggest stores, literally within eyesight, corner to corner, on the same block. And it was fine for us. At first, I was really scared, but it turned out to be great. And
Yeah,
the
that's
market was
good.
really growing, right? So there was plenty for everybody.
I like the fact that you saw it as them educating your consumer.
Yes.
That was a very sharp, shrewd thing that I picked up in there. Now you've since then you scaled up the business. You did very well with the brand to actually bring a cult community to it. It was in my eyes, and I hope I'm saying this right. It was the in and out of coffee.
Yes.
You either love In and Out burgers, and again, all the East Coast people over there are like, oh, the holy grail of burgers. You either love it or you don't like it, but there is definitely a cult community to it, and you had created the same. As I say, people were saying it to me in on the East Coast, and I didn't even have any idea what was going on. Now, when I met you, you actually had just come out with this book,
Yeah.
okay? And for those people listening, it's called The People Part by Annie Hyman Pratt, and you focus in here on leaders and teams.
Yeah.
Today we're in we're in a world where the great exit, people aren't going to work. People don't want to work. They want to find where that true north is. That's making it harder for leaders to lead when no one's around, isn't it?
Yes and no. It's I would say it's making it really hard, practically impossible for leaders without leadership skills. Like,
Okay.
for leaders that I'll just call it like, old style what people might call strict leadership or something. When you have a boss who is micromanaging, who wants to tell you all the tasks to do, wants to watch over your shoulder, who gets upset, blames everything on the team, like those bosses' days are absolutely numbered. And this quote, great resignation, that is making, kind of accelerating that having a poor culture, meaning poor leaders and bosses who treat their people as if they are, as if they are servants. That is no longer working. People are done with that. And so the big thing is, how can you lead with good authority without having it kind of put people down, without having it create an environment that people will use their hands but no longer will use their brains and think for you, or use their hearts and really want to do a good job, really think about the business first. The more um, uh, toxic's not the perfect word, but the more negative the culture is, the more people think only about themselves. It's like, how am I right now? Am I doing good right now? What's in it for me right at this second? They will not take a risk for the business. They will not make decisions. They will not surface problems. They won't do the things that you really need. And so to succeed in today's environment, you've got to be the kind of leader that people want to work with, that they want to work with. And it doesn't mean that you have to be a leader who takes people out to lunch every day and knows all their kids' names. That's not it. What people want today is an environment where they're set up to succeed. So certainly they want basic respect, meaning that they're in a place that is not filled with blame, judgment, criticism, ignoring people, avoiding people. They want an environment where they are, we call it a psychologically safe environment. They want an environment where people are safe to speak up, to say the truth, even if it's, I made a mistake, so that we can all gather around, help people solve problems, and work on the business. Because if I'm busy, if I'm a team member and I'm busy watching my own back, either from my boss or not wanting to get thrown under the bus by my coworker, if I'm busy doing that, I can't work on the business at all. And the best people, this is I think it's kind of interesting. A very famous Gallup poll says that 75% of people quit their job not because of the job, but because of a bad boss. They quit bosses, not jobs.
Ooh, I like
Yes.
that. I
Yes.
like that. They quit bosses, not jobs. There's a
That's
couple
right.
of things in there that I want to challenge you on and get your opinion and feedback on.
Yeah.
Now, you were actually present when I was interviewing Sammy the Bull
Yeah.
Gravano, the mafia hitman.
Yes.
Very interesting future podcast that's going to be, but that was an interesting conversation. In private conversations I was having with him, he was saying that respect was everything, but
Yes.
respect was also limited today because there's this old idea of, well, you get respect, you earn respect. Now you're talking about coming into an environment and from day one being respected. And we're
Yes.
also in a society, and I hate to say this, but we're in a gotcha society. People are being called out for something that they wore inappropriately at a fancy dress party in like 2001. So thankfully we were safe before then because there were no cell phone cameras to view any of
Right.
that. But we've all dressed up as Chinamen and stupid stuff. I
Yeah.
remember having a fancy dress party where I was Fu Manchu,
Yeah.
so I'm
Yeah.
sure
Yeah.
that wouldn't go down well now, not that I
Yeah.
care. But my point is that we're in a gotcha society, which causes us to be very, very resistant about coming forward.
Yeah.
And you're saying, hey, come into this environment, and from day one, I'm going to treat you with respect and openness. But it's
Yes.
contradictory to how we live in our life today, where people don't
Yes.
treat each other with respect.
Yes, absolutely. And I think there's a couple couple different definitions or ways we think about respect. So the kind of respect I'm talking about is that we're in an environment where we care. Where, like, if I'm on the team, I care about other people's well-being and success. Okay, I care about it. That means I think about it. So while you still have to earn respect in many things, like like if someone comes in and they're a great new marketing person, okay, nobody knows if they should respect their skills or not yet. They haven't demonstrated anything. So there's a lot of respect that's still going to be earned, but we want to start in a place where it's like, I respect that you're a human being with
Right.
feelings, that has needs, that actually can't perform if they think they're being thought poorly of. Right? Like, think about a time, for most people have had some kind of boss, or maybe even a parent or something, that they, or a teacher that they knew disliked them, right? Especially, like, I don't know, I had a teacher who I knew disliked me. Okay. Yeah. So when you have that, it's very hard to perform. It's like I did worse on tests because I knew this teacher was like, had it out for me. She was like, you're going to fail this test. Right. And so then because I was so anxious and having so much trouble concentrating on the material, right? I would make mistakes. And so we want people to be in an environment where we know they are respected for being human, for being a coworker. That doesn't mean that you can be a poor performer and stay. At that, if you're a poor performer and you can't be, you're not a fit here, but I can still care about you as a human being. There's no reason to beat that person down, tell them how awful they are, right? Tell them how they're just messing up over and over, how they're, how you don't know how they got this job, or some implied insults. Like, instead of that, you can just say, this is not a fit. I think about business a lot like sports teams. Okay, so like, if I ever got onto like a college level basketball court or something, you know, people would immediately be like, "Whoa, Annie, can't stay here on this basketball court. This is not for you." you know, no matter how nice they are to me, no matter how much they want me to be successful, but they would be like, "Get back to your books." this this job is not for you, professional basketball player. I don't think so. And and that's okay. Not everything is a fit for everybody. But they don't have to say, "Oh my god, Annie, this is like how, why are you even here?" Like, that's beyond, right? So that's the kind of respect I'm talking about. And then people can relax and do their best work, because that's what we want.
I still think that's contradictory to today's society. Sadly, we don't
Uh-huh.
treat each other with respect. So
Yes.
me and you, we're both slightly over 21. We come from a period where there was a lot more respect demanded and then
Yes.
earned. And now it's almost kind of like, as long as you've got a cell phone in your hand, you can be rude and malicious
Yes.
to people because they can't hit you, they can't attack you. And we've fallen down into that society. So you've
Yes.
gone up against a hill by actually producing this book. Why was it so important for you to write the people part?
Because even though today's couple things, even though today's society is a gotcha society, and I think it's I think it's actually pretty confusing, because lots of people are wondering, how is it that the bad guys can win? That's sort of how it feels today sometimes, right? How is it that the bad guys can win? And it's like, okay, yeah, there are situations where I'm as shocked as the next person of like, how the heck did that happen? How are the bad guys winning? But at the same time, it's not in the long term. It's like, yeah, you can have a gotcha moment, but you are not, you're not going to be welcomed onto a team that can truly win, that can truly make a big difference. And the thing about business today is, it is a game of attracting and retaining the best professionals, the best players. So I'll just make the comparison to basketball again. I love that game because it's very easy to understand. We have a team here in California, the Golden State Warriors, and they just won their, I don't know,
Yep.
their fourth or their fifth championship, something like that. And there are many players on that team who say publicly, "I only want to work with Steph Curry and Steve Kerr, the coach. I never want to leave these two, ever, because not only do they treat me so well so I can do my best work, but we get to win over and over again." So it's like, because people have so much choice, even in a gotcha culture, we still need to provide something where they want to be, they want to stay, they want to give you their best work. That's why I still believe in it.
So I'm still honed in on the people quit bosses, not businesses. And I really absolutely love that. That should be your new mug or your new T-shirt or your mouse
Yeah.
pad. But how important is it for companies, as the CEO, as the owner, the founder, to make sure that they've got the best leadership first before they look at attracting the right people? Because usually you bring people in, then you get more people, and then you go, oh crap, I need a leader to. Are we going about it about wrong way? Should we find leadership before we find the people, or the people before the which way should we be doing it, and how should we be doing it?
For small businesses, like, those that are entrepreneurial businesses and they're growing, they need to find good people with leadership potential, and then they're going to grow them.
Okay.
Right? Okay.
Internally. Okay.
Yes, internally. For bigger businesses, yes, you need to bring in strong leaders. Otherwise, you will have the worst team. And the thing about it is, not only do people quit bosses, not businesses, but it's your best people that quit. The worst people stay. They don't have good alternatives. So it's so fundamental. And the best people, they it's like they need to succeed. So you've got to set them up to succeed. You can't give them, goals that are so impossible. People, the best people, they won't play a game they can't win. You've got to give them the resources, the environment, the development, the support, so that they can actually win the game. And yes, the leadership team, it's, I think about it as, you show me your leadership team, right? And I'll show you how successful you're going to be.
I remember, I think it was Richard Branson said that you've got to train your staff well enough that they can leave, and love them strong enough that they want to stay.
That's a great quote. I love that.
I'm pretty the quote may not be verbatim, but it's definitely Richard Branson that came out with that when I called it. So we need to focus on the leadership. What are the mistakes that today's leaders are actually making?
Oh gosh, yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so many.
Give us your top three.
Yeah. One of the biggest mistakes that leaders make is not having their own self-leadership. Okay, so to lead well, you have to be in a good place. And one of the first things I talk about in this book is how human beings, we have different parts of our brain that drive our behavior. Okay, the part that we want is this intentional part in our frontal lobe, and this part of our brain that is extraordinary. It can think, if you're Einstein, like Einstein, right? But it's very weak. It's weak. It's not, you have to really develop it. And it's not automatic. It's where intentional thinking happens. We have a whole nother part of us, two other parts that drive our behavior. One is our emotions, and that's from our amygdala. So we have this part of our brain that is old and so strong, needs zero effort, and it is a threat detecting machine. So it is designed to see threats everywhere and keep us in kind of, fight or flight. Keep us in freeze or please. And we can't turn it off. And it's so strong. I think of it as like, you can't not smell smoke. When you smell smoke, you're immediately, your thing is going to be, am I in a theater? Because if I am, I have to run. Or am I outside at a barbecue and this is fine that I'm smelling smoke? So we do that with people's faces all day, with people's tone. The threats today are not physical. They are 10 million psychological threats, right? Of like, if I see my boss roll their eyes when I'm talking in a meeting, now I can't even concentrate. Now I'm thinking inside my head, oh my God, am I about to get fired? Did he just think the thing I said was dumb? Am I standing up and doing the wrong thing here? Did everybody else see that? Do they think I'm dumb? Right? This threat detecting is so strong. And if we spend our days in a triggered place where we are thinking thoughts that are, that are about criticism, criticizing or blaming others, blaming ourselves, that we're in judgment, that we are, trying to avoid things. That's one of my favorite kind of self-protection modes, is avoidance, right? If I'm really stressed, you won't find me. So business is stressful. And we need people to be able to handle the stress and still show up well. And that's the self-leadership part that if I'm freaking out, what do you think my team is doing? Right? If I'm in a place and I come into the room and I'm like, oh my gosh, I just was talking to a client and they were saying how they had this problem and you guys are the worst and I can't believe you didn't take better care of that client, whatever. If I come into the room that way, nobody's going to be thinking about how to fix this. Everybody's going to be thinking, how do I make Annie calm down? How do I get out of this room? Right? How do I leave this job? and we can't have that. So self-leadership, the ability for us to, when we go to a self-protected place, we get triggered to get ourselves out. And one of the very first things for that is to learn to pause. Pause. If you're talking, stop talking. And that is one of the biggest mistakes that leaders, that bosses, that entrepreneurs make, is that they're so triggered so often that their team is not working on the business. They are working on, making their boss okay or tolerable or something. And that is the biggest waste of, resources, of thinking ability ever. So that's a huge mistake that leaders make. And they don't even think well. When they're in those kind of places, they make terrible decisions.
As you're saying it, I can remember various times in my earlier life when, you find yourself just trying to kind of like, make sure the boss is happy without actually doing anything productive.
Exactly.
So, yeah, it is a spinning wheels in mud scenario. You're not actually getting anywhere and it's all just visual and no production at all.
Exactly.
So, tell me, how can people get hold of you and how can they get a copy of the People Part book?
Yes. So they can get hold of me, my company. Again, I'm Annie Hyman Pratt. You can just Google that and I will come up. And you can also look for our company. It's called Leading Edge Teams, TEAMS with an S. And you can find the People Part on my page or on my company page. You can also find it on Amazon. If you're here in the States, on Target.com, on Barnes & Noble, any of those booksellers. You can also get the audio. It's me talking. I will read you the book. and that's on Audible. And yeah, we love to meet new people. We love to talk about business and about, how to help people with their businesses. Even if people aren't ready or looking for a lot of support, it's like still, what do you guys say? Ring us up. We love to talk and get to know people because we know that at some point you're going to be ready to really develop your leadership, your team. And as much as, one of the reasons I wrote this book is because as much as I love systems and processes and strategy, I've never been with a company, and now I've worked with many, 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 maybe close to 100. I've never worked with a company where the people weren't the most important thing. They are the biggest asset you have.
As they say, they are the people part.
Exactly.
So, Annie, thank you very much for taking the time and being on the show with us. It's been an honor. It's been a pleasure. And we wish you all the best with the book.
Yeah, thank you so much. Great to be here.
All the best.
Bye.
Hey, I hope you liked that episode of the Art of Making Things Happen podcast. And remember, these are done for you. If you like them, subscribe, share them around. But if you don't like them, send me an email to ask@stevedsims.com and you can tell me what I need to do to make this the most dynamic podcast you listen to. Anyway, make sure whatever you learned from the last podcast, you actually do something with. Without action, it's just a bunch of people blowing air. Have a good time. Until next time. Bye.